You're listening to the Science of CX. My name is Steve Pappas. I'm known for my relentless pursuit of all things customer. Across my career, and also in my 6 startups, I've had to learn how to make decisions in business that customers really respond to. Let's spend some time together and help your business soar, grow, and accelerate. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Science of CX. Today, I have a special guest, Luke Jamieson from Melbourne, Australia. Luke, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Steve. It's an absolute pleasure.
So let me tell you a little bit about Luke. Luke was named in the top 25 CX influencers in 2019, and he's also the founder and CEO of Playfulli. He's a thought leader on employee experience and how gamification can be used for good to support diversity and foster positive cultures that drive sustainable success. Luke's approaches have attracted many coveted awards and have helped shape some of Australia's largest organizations' customer and employee experience programs. Luke's also a certified Lego Serious Play Facilitator, a podcaster, and studied human-centered design at D-School at Stanford. Great. Luke, I understand we're going to talk about some interesting things around customer experience in contact centers, some offshoring, how to set people up for work from home. So why don't we dive right into it? And let's talk about what's the landscape looking like now when you're thinking about contact centers, especially in Australia?
It's been really interesting. All of a sudden, it's the hot job prospect market. So interestingly, in the last week, there's been sort of over 6,000 jobs posted for contact centers and a huge amount of applications. I mean, Telstra put up 1,000 jobs just last week and they had 19,000 applicants. So I love the thought of that. I mean, I know that there's a lot of people just looking for work, but the thought that they're looking for work that is in an industry that I think is really a worthy industry and is a great job is fantastic, because the automotive industry, I'll just pivot quickly across to this, the automotive industry has really suffered here in Australia. And we've seen job losses here, loss of manufacturing, and some of our biggest names like Ford and Holden have stopped manufacturing here. And you see it on the front page, 300 jobs lost, and people are in absolute uproar about it. But in the same week, you'll see a tiny little article in page 35 in the bottom corner that 5,000 jobs have been outsourced to overseas in contact center roles, and no one says boo. So to see some good press for jobs coming back onshore at the moment, I think it's great. I mean, the reason that's happening is that the Philippines is essentially shut down, and that's where a lot of jobs from Australia, contact center jobs from Australia, have gone to. So for me, it's kind of nice to see some of those jobs coming back here, and I hope that after all this, that many of them stay.
Great. Well, maybe we should drill in a little bit, because now that those jobs are coming back, there's probably a need to train those people very quickly and get them up to speed. Whereas prior, contact center agent, they may have gone through a training, an induction period. Maybe they were nesting inside of the contact center with someone else as the master and apprentice model. How are they going to deal with getting people up and running very quickly, new policies and procedures happening, and they're sitting at home by themselves?
Yeah, look, I think that is definitely a challenge. In an environment where we have to be training from home, trainers and coaches are having to come up with new strategies, but I'm not sure if they're really new. It's just, it's forcing them to go back to basics and say, how do we engage people? And training at its heart, we know that so much knowledge is lost when someone walks out of a classroom. It's like there's an imaginary chasm at the door that knowledge just falls into as they walk out the door. That doesn't really change, I think, from doing that remotely. Some of the coaches and trainers I have been speaking to are definitely struggling with trying to get engagement and get that same feeling of engagement. We there's definitely an energy that happens when we are together, but good training is unforgettable. And we have to come up with new strategies to make that unforgettable and engaging all learning styles. So doing things like gamification or using microlearning and mixing those sort of things into our training, I think are going to make a big difference in how we do that remotely. But look, it's definitely a challenge. I think that a lot of organizations that are bringing on people quickly will probably start with a triage model and do a lot of on-the-job learning because, we learn so much on the job anyway. So, throwing people in the deep end in a time that I think customers are empathetic to isn't such a bad strategy. Everyone knows that we're all trying to cope in our own way with this. And I think that just providing a service, providing somebody there to answer the phone and say, hey, I'm still here, we are still here, is great customer experience, even if they can't necessarily answer every single part.
Right. So let's talk, you mentioned about the change management. Where do you see the change management revealing itself during this crisis period here the most?
Yeah, I think it's around employee experience. The businesses had a business continuity plan, and that was to how do we get up and running as quickly as possible if something bad happens. And a lot of them, and I've written plenty of these, it's around, what does it look after one day? What does it look like after a week? What does it look like after a month? I'm not sure many of us really started thinking about what does this look like after a year? And I'm not sure everyone was ready for this. And all of a sudden, these BCP plans that had ticked off technology and communication never really had anything around employee experience. And employee experience is, we're 4 weeks into lockdown here. The honeymoon is over for so many people. They thought that working from home would be the dream. I get to sit in my PJs, maybe watch some Netflix on the side, don't have, my manager looking over my shoulder, all this sort of stuff. 3-4 weeks in, people are saying, oh, this is not what I expected. The grass isn't greener. I feel lonely. I miss the over the partition chats. I miss the camaraderie and the energy that comes from being with other people. And, we all, there's different styles of people, right? Some people are really driven and by autonomy and having that and love the autonomy. But there's other people who thrive on social activity, and contact center is a hub for social activity. And so to lose that, all of a sudden, that pain is really starting to be felt. So I think 4 weeks in, the change management focus is around employee experience, employee well-being, and how do we do that remotely?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because the people that work for me, I'm noticing the last few days, people are saying the same thing. They're starting to feel fatigued too. Their sleep patterns have changed. Either they're falling asleep earlier and they're waking up 4 or 5 in the morning, and there are some real changes that are happening out there until you find a rhythm. I would guess that would be so. I can understand what you're saying. The exhaustion is starting to settle in, so the honeymoon is definitely over. And I've had people tell me, I just want to meet at the coffee machine. Let's just go into the lunchroom and grab a coffee together for 5 minutes. They're yearning for some of those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's organizations that are having coffee meetings, and I'm pretty sure you're doing a few of those things, right? You're having coffee meetings and lunches.
Yeah, we do. We do coffee in the morning, coffee or tea in the morning at 8:45, and it's just 10 or 15 minutes so that people can still feel that sense of we poured ourselves a cup of coffee, we have the coffee together, we get to catch up on what's going on. A few days a week, we bring our salads or our sandwiches or our curry or whatever it is, and we have the lunch around the conference table. But the interesting thing, and I think what people look forward to the most is we have fun time at 4:45 every day. We take everybody off of what they're doing, and for 15 minutes we have no work, no business talk. It's just around fun, and we pass the baton to a different employee to come up with the game, whether it's Name That Tune or Pictionary or doing something completely different. It's not what we're doing. It's about the fact that we're doing it together, and everyone, doesn't matter, line staff, doesn't matter what level of management, we're just doing it together. And I think people really like that. And it gives them something to look forward to, whichever days. I think next week we start lunchtime walks on the opposite days that we're not doing lunch at our tables. And now that the weather's getting better here in the U.S., especially here in the Northeast where we're located, we're just going to get out and find a place to walk, and we'll just have everybody on our phone, on our headset, and we could just chat while we're doing it.
Yeah, very cool. And I think this podcast is the Science of CX. I think right there's a whole heap of interesting science that's happening. And I think that's been forgotten about. And so I think that's something that we need to tap back into, which is some of the science that happens when we interact with people. You talk about something to look forward to and fun, and that's kicking off things like dopamine in our brains and making us happy, oxytocin when we're feeling trust and we're working as part of a team, serotonin when something feels important and we're part of something bigger and we're doing something that's valuable, and that sense of purpose. And now you're adding in walks, so there's some endorphins for you. So, some great science right there for an employee experience point of view.
Exactly. So what else around the work from home? Is there anything else that we didn't cover around the employee engagement, employee experience in work from home that we should touch on?
Look, I think there's probably two things. One is, I was watching a webinar this week where they showed all these photos of their staff set up at home, and there was some really nice setups, and obviously there was dogs featured in many of them, but there was a few that were really rough. There was one that was set up on a Rubbermaid box with a mattress behind it, and that was the office. And I think, in our haste to get everyone working from home, employee experience is the thing that needs to be focused on the most. Employee well-being, the providing an environment. Because we've just invited our workplace into our homes all of a sudden, and there's some vulnerability that comes with that. So being able to provide not just employee experience, but employee well-being, where people have psychological safety, that they're not going to be judged about what's in the background, not going to be that they feel like they can communicate and that there's an open communication and authenticity about it. So I think when you show vulnerability, authenticity follows very closely. And I think that's definitely, I think it's a positive thing that's coming out of this, but it also needs to be tabled and recognized that this is something that is different for so many people. So the other part is just that loss of camaraderie that kind of happens. We talked about training before, remotely. I think one of the challenges with that is when you go through an induction with people, you gain this camaraderie and you feel like you're part of the class of 2020, and you go through that whole process together. When you do that remotely, you kind of lose a lot of that. You lose the over the partition chats, the energy that comes from being together, and that shared purpose. The term that's going around is we're all in this together. And the reality is it doesn't really feel like that when you're sitting at your desk answering call after call after call after call, and you're there by yourself. It doesn't feel like you're in it together, and that shared purpose and camaraderie is lost. And so I think that's something that really needs to be built upon, and great communication with your manager. And I know lots of managers, they've been approaching me saying, how do I'm finding it really hard to engage my team now. I'm finding it hard to communicate and provide shared purpose. that needs to be the focus. And there's heaps of tools out there to do that. But in contact centers in particular, I think it's a real challenge because video conference isn't something you can just switch on and have on all day. You're there answering phone calls, so you can't have that interaction all day long. So there needs to be other ways to do that. And look, gamification is a great way to give a sense of shared purpose and drive your own metrics and all those sort of things. I think that's something that should be looked at. Open communication and lots of communication is key at this point in time.
Well, Luke, thank you. I'd like to know, how do people get in touch with you? I mean, if they're looking for some of the things you've talked about and done, how could they find you?
Yeah, there's LinkedIn's a great channel for me. Otherwise, Twitter @GamifyLuke, or you can go to my website, which is www.playfulli.com, and it's Playfully with an I at the end, not a Y.
Now, is there anything you're working on that you'd like to talk about?
The whole work from home piece has really driven a lot of organizations to look at new ways to engage. Gamification is obviously where I play a lot in, and there was no pun intended there. So people are realizing that engagement space is quite challenging when you're not face to face. And gamification has, for me, gamification is it's not even about fun. I just think it's a great vehicle to recognize motivational diversity. And the traditional KPIs that we're used to, and particularly in a contact center space, are very driven around sort of those lag metrics. We've got lots of data in contact centers, and those are all well and good, but at the end of the day, when somebody's at home, they're not all of a sudden that motivated by them. And gamification really is a great vehicle to recognize behavior, not just KPIs. And that's why I love it, because organizations are now starting to say, okay, well, how do we recognize these behaviors remotely when we don't see that real time? And how do we provide shared purpose when we're not all in the same space? And how do we get someone who's driven by team competition or to compete against themselves or to compete against others? How do we bring that together? Because in a real-time environment, you would just do that. It's like, hey, Steve, I want you to pair up with Luke, and you guys work together. Or it might be as a team, let's try and beat the other team, or you set yourself your own goal. It's quite easy to do that in a face-to-face environment, but remotely, that's a much more challenging space. And gamification is a great vehicle for that. And so, I'm working with a number of companies right now that are pivoting to that online gamified employee engagement strategy and seeing some really good results from it. So, if there's one thing for me that's come out of this, tragedy of what our world's going through, is that we're starting to think new and creative ways and applying, open to new ideas. I think, gamification's had a bit of maybe a bad name in the past because it can often seem like you're trying to manipulate someone to do something just for some points or to be at the top of a leaderboard. For me, that's never been what gamification's about. It's always been about measuring behaviors and embracing diversity. And so now all of a sudden this has now allowed that platform to be able to speak about that more and talk and share about that. And when people hear the story about what gamification really can be, all of a sudden they're much more interested. So that's what I'm working on at the moment, spending more time on that, working on my launching a podcast around that sort of thing, and behavioral psychology and all that sort of stuff.
Great. Well, Luke, this has been a great time. It's gone by so fast. And I want to thank you for joining us. And I realize that these are tough times. So I thank you again, and please stay safe and stay healthy.
Yeah, you too, Stephen. Thanks so much for having me on your podcast.
Thank you. You've been listening to the Science of CX. My name is Steve Pappas. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. And if you have, the highest compliment that you can give us is to subscribe, rate, and review the Science of CX. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next episode.